Hello, hope you're doing great. Today I'm going to talk about the nervous tissue. Especially I'm going to talk about the neurons and neuroglia. During this lecture, I'm going to talk about firstly about the parts of a neuron. Then I'm going to talk about the different types of a neuron. And then I'm going to talk about the function of a neuron. And then I'm going to talk about the different types of neuroglia or glial cells. For example, Schwann cell, oligodendrocyte, astrocytes, satellite cells, microglia, and ependymal cells. Okay, so let's get started. Before start the video, go to description box and click on website link and download our today's video lecture free PDF lecture notes. Okay, let's get started. First, as you know from previous lecture, that when cells come together, they are going to make different types of tissues. Okay, different types of tissues. For example, they are going to make epithelial tissues, they are going to make muscle tissues, they are going to make uh, connective tissues, and they're going to make nervous tissues. So today I'm going to talk about nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is one of the four basic tissues in our body. Okay, so this nervous tissue, for example, this is a nervous tissue. This nervous tissue is made of cells, made of these cells. Okay, so this nervous tissue is made of two types of cells. One type of cells are called neurons. One type of cells are called neurons, and another type of cells are called neuroglia. Neuroglia or glial cells. Neuroglia or glial cells. Okay, so neurons are structural and also important functional cells of the nervous tissue, but neuroglia or glial cells are supportive cells of nervous tissue. It means they are going to support these neurons. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about structure in parts and different types of neurons. What are neurons? Neurons are nervous tissue cells that has role in processing and also in transmitting of signals and also information throughout the body. Okay, so these are neurons. Let me talk about different types and different parts of a neuron. Okay, actually neurons are different in size and also they are different in structure, but there are some common features between all neurons, that these features or these structures are same between all neurons. For example, this part of neuron where the nucleus, where the cytoplasm, where a lot of organelles are present, this area of a neuron is called soma. It's called soma, or it's called a cell body. It's called soma or cell body. Okay, these extensions of neurons, these projections of neurons, as a collectively they are called neuritis. They are called neuritis. They're not neuritis its, it means inflammation of this neuron. They're neuritis. Okay, so let me talk firstly about the soma. Okay, soma is, in soma we have the nucleus. We have nucleus. In soma we have nucleus. Okay, in soma we have nucleus, and in nucleus we have the DNA. So this is the part of a neuron which has or which contains DNA. Okay, then in soma we have different types of organs. For example, we have mitochondria. Mitochondria to help us in production of energy. Okay, also we have here some ribosomes, like other cells. Okay, that I have talked about them in previous lecture. Two important thing that here we can see, there one is called this collection are can you see these collections? These collections are of rough endoplasmic reticulum. In other cells, rough endoplasmic reticulum was like this, okay, like this, like reticuli. Here, rough endoplasmic reticulum is like these dense bodies that they also consist of ribosomes. So they are called nasal substance because of that they are die by nasal skin dice, okay, nasal substance, or also they are called nasal body or nasal substance. So instead of rough endoplasmic reticulum, we have nasal substance, and its role is in protein synthesis like rough endoplasmic reticulum. Very good. Also we have Golgi apparatus, Golgi apparatus, okay. And another thing that we have here in neurons, there are tiny microfilaments, okay, that there are actually intermediate filaments. These thin fibers are called neuro neurofibril. These thin fibers are called neurofibril, and it gives strength for the soma of a neuron, okay. And actually it's from type 4 intermediate filament anyway. So this was about the soma. There was two things new. One was nasal body or nasal substance, and another was neurofibril, okay. Let me talk about these extensions. We have from a neuron a large extension. You know this neuroid, we have two types of neuritis. One is a so large extension, this one is called axon. This one is called axon, okay. And also we have some small extensions, and these types of neuritis are called dendrites. Dendrites, okay. Dendrites means it means tree like, okay. These are seems like tree, okay. Anyway, let me talk about the differences between the axon and dendrites. Number one, axon is large. Axon is large, okay. Number two, axon is thicker in diameter. It is thick, okay. Number three, the important thing, that axons transmit signals or action potential, that we will talk about the action potential in future video lecture. It carry action potential away from the soma. It carry action potential or stimulation away from soma. So it carry action potential away from a soma. Very good, okay. But dendrites are small. Dendrites are small. Dendrites are small. Then dendrites are thin. They're so tiny and thin projections. And another one, the dendrites carry stimulation, that we will talk in future, carry stimulation or action potential towards soma, toward soma. So they carry action potential toward soma, okay. Very good. And also axon is only one, and dendrites are more in numbers, okay. Now let me talk more about the axon. This part of axon, this start part of axon, this conical part of this axon, this is called axon hillock. It's called axon hillock. This is called axon hillock. This is called axon hillock, okay. You know, in axon hillock we have thousands and thousands of different types of voltage gated channels that has rule in depolarization and in repolarization of the cells, okay. In some books they are going to say that when stimulation comes from the side, from the dendrites, for example, we give a stimulation to a dendrite, this stimulation, these charges come passively to this axon hillock. And because we have abundant and so much channels here. So if this stimulation be strong, so it causes the threshold potential to touch the threshold potential here, and causes depolarization and repolarization. So the first point where the depolarization and repolarization is started in an axon is axon hillock. Okay, in some book, but in some books they say that no, this passive stimulation, these passive charges come here and this summit here, they come together, and after this area there is another area, this red area, this area is called initial segment. It is called initial segment. Okay, let me talk about this important point. Initial segment. Okay, don't mind out my spelling. This is called initial segment. In some books, they say that after summation of these passive charges, the first depolarization and repolarization gets started here in initial segments. Why? Why? There are some evidence, because here the channels and also protein structure. For example, if I zoom it like this, so we have a lot of this one cell membrane, this another cell membrane, this empty area. Okay, so we have abundant and so much voltage gated channels or sodium voltage gated channels in also protein structures, and that's why they are going to say that the first area where the action potential gets started, it is initial segment. Okay, so this was about axon hillock. So axon hillock is the area between the axon, between the initial segment and soma, and initial segment is the area between axon hillock and other part of axon. And after generating this action potential, they are going to uh, furthermore to this end part of the axon. Okay, now let me talk about other parts of this axon. So one is axon hillock, another one was initial segment, next one at the end. This at the end, this axon makes some branches. Okay, like this. They make some branches like this at the end of this axon, like these dendrites, and these branches are called telodendria. These branches are called telodendria. These branches are called telodendria. Telo means the end, it's the end part of this axon, and dendria means tree like. Okay, they looks like a tree. And at the end of each telodendria, we have a small bulb, and this bulb is called axonal bulb or terminal bulb or terminal button. So I like this terminal bulb or axonal bulb. Okay, what is the function of axonal bulb? In axonal bulb, we have storage of neurotransmitters, for example, epinephrine, norepinephrine, for example, glutamate, serotonin, GABA, and so on. So all of them are neurotransmitter, and neurotransmitter are those chemical substances that are released from these neurons, and then it causes stimulation of other neurons or of other parts of the body, for example muscles. Anyway, so this was axonal bulb. Now there is a question that we have in these vesicles some neurotransmitters, and these neurotransmitters are, some of them are proteins, and we said before that we have DNA in soma. So how these proteins are made here? Okay, how they transported from this area to this area? Let's like this. Firstly, this protein will be made here in soma. Okay, after making them, they are packed in a vesicle. After packing them in vesicle, here is for example, let me draw it here, this an axon. Within an axon we have these lines, we have this, you know, these red lines, and these red lines, these are fibers, and these are called microtubules. They are called microtubules. So now there is a protein which is called dynein, or which are called kinesin. So these kinesin proteins takes this vesicle which is fueled by neurotransmitter, and then he will walk on this. He will walk on this, for example, like this, and here is a neurotransmitter or a vesicle, and then it will transport this vesicle slowly to the end part of this neuron. Okay, and this protein is called kinesin. This is called kinesin. Okay, we have two types of axonal. This is called axonal transportation. We have two types of axonal transportation here. One is from the soma to the axonal bulb, and this is called anterograde transportation. And one is from the bulb to the soma. For example, they brings some mitochondria for degeneration here, and also some viruses could travel from this area to this area. In anterograde transportation, we transport substances by the help of kinesin, and in retrograde transport, this one from the bulb to the soma, this is called retrograde transportation. And in retrograde transportation, we transport substances by the help of dynein. Okay, so this was axonal transportation. Come here at the end part of this bulb. Now two neurons have connection with each other. For example, if I give some stimulation to this area, so from here, from this point to my spinal cord, there is one neuron. From my spinal cord to my cerebral cortex, to my diencephalon, or to my brain, there is another neuron, and from the diencephalon to the cerebral cortex, there is another neuron. So these neurons come together and they're attached in a point. Okay, for example, this is one neuron and this is another neuron. When these two neurons come together, this area is called synapse. This area is called synapse, and its plural noun is synapses. Okay, so this area is called synapses. That's one. And between these two neurons, that's one neuron, that's two neurons. For example, these two neurons, this empty gap, this small empty gap between these two neurons, this empty small gap, this gap is called synaptic cleft. 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 Very good. And in synaptic cleft, we have a lot of proteins, connection of proteins. There is like reticular structure. Abundant proteins come together like cytoskeletons and give this area a strength. Okay. Anyway, this neuron, for example, this is the first neuron and this is the second neuron. This first neuron, from where the stimulation comes, this is the first neuron and this is second neuron. This first neuron is called, this area is called presynaptic membrane. This area is called presynaptic membrane. And this another one is the second neuron. This area is called postsynaptic membrane. Okay, this was presynaptic, this was postsynaptic. From presynaptic membrane, some things are released. They are neurotransmitter, and they could stimulate this postsynaptic neuron. They could stimulate this postsynaptic neuron by two mechanisms. This should stimulate them, or these could inhibit them. This neurotransmitter could stimulate them or could inhibit them. If this stimulate them, we call this is EPSP, excitatory postsynaptic potential. Okay, if we inhibit this postsynaptic membrane, so we call it IPSP, inhibitory postsynaptic potential. We will talk on action potential in on these things in future video lecture. Okay, but anyway, we have two types of synapses. We have many types of synapses. For example, based on their communication. Okay, based on their communication, we have two types of synapses based on their communication. This was synapse. Based on their communication, we have two types of synapses. One type of synapses are called chemical synapses. In chemical synapses, for example, in chemical synapses, neurotransmitter is released, and this neurotransmitter stimulate this post synaptic membrane, okay, and causes stimulation or inhibition of this. So this is called chemical synapses. And in another type of synapses based on its communication, it is electrical synapses. In electrical synapses, the communication is directly by the gap junction. For example, from here positive charges come. We'll talk on this in future lecture in action potential. And this positive charge then, or this negative charge, then transported to this postsynaptic membrane and causes stimulation or inhibition of this postsynaptic membrane. And this is called electrical synapses. Okay. And another type of synapses based on its neurotransmitter. Based on its neurotransmitter, we have, for example, GABAergic synapse. GABAergic synapse. In GABAergic synapse, these neurotransmitters should be GABA. Another one we have adrenergic synapse. Adrenergic synapse. In adrenergic synapse, these neurotransmitters could be adrenaline or epinephrine. Another one is called cholinergic synapse. Cholinergic synapse. In cholinergic synapse, these neurotransmitter could be acetylcholine. Another one is called glutamatergic synapse. And in glutamatergic synapse, these neurotransmitters could be glutamate and so on. So these were the types of synapses based on its communication, based on its neurotransmitter. Okay. Also, we have some types of synapses based on its location. For example, this is a neuron. This is this is an axon, and this axon has synapse with a dendrite. So this type of synapse is called exodendritic synapse. Another one, these are between two axons. For example, this is an axon, this is also an axon. So communication between two axons are called exonic synapses. Another one should be between the axon and between the soma, and this is called exosomatic synapses. The most common one is exodendritic synapse. Okay, and so on. So these were the types of synapses based on its communication, based on its neurotransmitters, and based on its location or its structures. Okay. So there are two another area. Here is some area in this presynaptic membrane that looks dense, and here is a lot of channels, and here is a lot of proteins, and this area is called active zone. This area is called active zone. And in front of this area, in front of active zone, here is, it's called post synaptic density. So these two areas, post synaptic density and active zone, these two areas are the areas where we have a lot of proteins, a lot of channels, a lot of cytoskeletons, and so on. So this was about this part at the end part of the axon. Let me talk a little bit about different types. Okay, and I'll talk about different types of neuron at the end. Okay, and here let me talk about now about the dendrites. Okay, dendrites are small extensions. They are small extensions. We have one thing here in dendrite. In axon also we have some branches in its side which are called collaterals. Okay, we have some branches which are called collateral segments. Okay, and in this dendrite we have some small projections. Okay, like this, these mushroom projections. These mushroom projections are called dendritic spines. dendritic spines. These are the areas where an axon branch or a telodendra comes here, and it makes a synapse with these dendritic spines, and then this stimulation carry to soma, and from the soma to axonal helix, and from the axonal helix to the initial segments. Okay, so anyway, this was a lot about the parts of the neuron. Now let me talk about different types of a neuron. We have different types of neuron. We have some types of neuron based on its function, based on its function, based on its function, based on its function. Okay, based on its function, we have three types of neurons. First one, they are called sensory neurons. Okay, sensory neurons, for example, this is our brain. Okay, this brain. Sensory neurons, they bring information from all over the body to the central nervous system. Okay, and these are called sensory neurons. Another type of neurons are called motor neurons, and this type of neurons carry commands, and stimulation from the central nervous system. For example, this is a muscle. Okay, from the central nervous system to different types of muscles, glands, organs, and tissues. Okay, another one is called interneurons. One is called inter interneurons. So interneurons are those neurons. For example, we have a lot of them in central nervous system and in spinal cords. For example, this one neuron, this another neurons. So interneurons take place within between two neurons, and connect two neurons together or more neurons together, and they are called interneurons. We have some other types of neuron. We have other types of neuron based on their neurotransmitter like synapses. Okay, based on their neurotransmitters. For example, we have a GABAergic neuron, like the sinus here is also neuron, GABAergic neuron. We have, for example, adrenergic neuron. We have cholinergic neuron. We have cholinergic neuron. We have glutamatergic neuron, and so on. And also we have some neurons based on its structure, based on its structure. Some neurons are, for example, this is a soma. We have only one extension from it, the soma. It could be dendrite or it could be axon. So this type of neuron is called uni mean one. Okay, unipolar neuron. This type of neurons are called unipolar neurons. Another type of neuron that we here we should have two extension. One could be dendrite and one could be axon. For example, in our spinal cord, and I don't go deep to this thing. So this type of neuron is called bipolar neuron. Okay, some neurons, for example, in CNS, we have a lot of this type of neurons that they have more extension, more than two extensions, and these are called multi means more, bi means two, multipolar neurons. There is another type of neuron. It's so interested type of this neuron. For example, this is a neuron. Firstly, it could give one branch, then it will be divided into two branch. So actually they are unipolar, but then they are divided into two poles, into two branches. So these are not unipolar and these are not bipolar. So these are called pseudo mean lie. Okay, not true. Pseudo unipolar neuron, this type of neuron we have in our spinal cord. Okay, for example, there is an area, it's called dorsal ganglion. Okay, anyway, dorsal root ganglion. Anyway, this was a structure and functions of neuron, and about the action potential, generation of action potential, resting membrane potential, and functions of our neurons. We will talk on this in future lecture under the title of resting membrane potential and action potential. Now I'm going to talk about the neuroglia or glial cells.